Hi everybody, welcome back to the LEGO Studio. My name is Robbie. Today in front of us I've brought back the Haunted House Drop Ride from the new Fairground collection to talk about some tips and tricks for troubleshooting this. So this was a request by Easy Craftsman, who I recognize from Brixie's chats in his live streams. So what I'm going to do is kind of go through all the points in which I think there are issues, sort of in the order in which is easiest to fix. So number one is probably just using your app. So every time you start the app, it does a little calibration. So it kind of does a few motions automatically to test what's what, and then hopefully everything works out. And it raises up, doors open, pauses, and drops. So, if you're having issues, I think the easiest thing to do, let me turn the sound off on this, is to hit that red square, that stop button in the upper right-hand corner, and that kind of resets the system and recalibrates. I did a previous take of this video, and I had to do it about 2 or 3 times to get it to work. And what it's doing is sort of just testing your 2 motors in the back. So you've got the one here to work the clutch, which basically just turns 90 degrees and then 90 degrees back. Then the other one, which goes into the actual chain mechanism and turns the chain and raises the cab. So I think secondarily, your point of problems could be in the motor, and that you've got these switched. So the clutch motor goes into the A port, and the chain motor goes into the B port of your powered up hub. So you'll know pretty quickly if you run through that calibration and something seems really wrong, that it's probably got these backwards. So make sure this clutch motor is in the A port, chain motor is in the B port. Another thing to mention is these need to be medium linear motors from powered up. The regular ones don't have that ability to be programmed and do the different sort of functions and actions that these ones do. So make sure you got the right motors and they're plugged into the right spot. That's sort of number 2. Number 3 would be checking the chain. A lot of people say, oh, it's too tight. I took a link off or 2. Don't do that. It's supposed to be tight. You can see that this one is fairly tight. It's not by any means loose, but it's not incredibly taut. It was a little difficult to kind of get that initial stretch to get it snapped in, but it has worked pretty darn well ever since, and I've used the exact amount of links that they suggest. The only thing I would suggest is if you don't want to use the powered up motor, you want to use old-fashioned power functions, is putting a motor here, taking out the second gray link that catches the cab, that sort of sits on, just so that when you're constantly running this, because it will operate in a completely different fashion for using power functions, take this guy out, replace it with the black one so you have the same amount of links. That way it just doesn't catch as quickly before it's had a chance to fully drop. So check your chain, make sure all of them are snapped together correctly. I don't know if it really matters the orientation, but I've got all mine hooking in the same way. So check your chain, make sure it's nice and taut, that it's catching here, it's not rubbing against anything, and that hopefully might solve your problems. If not, you're in for more of a deeper fix. So the other thing I would suggest, if the app doesn't do it, the motors don't do it, and the chain's not doing it, check to see if it's catching anywhere in the elevator shaft. So if you can get these things to move and it's just sort of struggling through there, sort of take note of where it is and where it's struggling and where it might be catching. Go in there. You might have to take some of it off and kind of just push out those walls. You can get in from the door somewhat and do a little bit of that, and maybe upwards, but hopefully you have access enough to kind of open up some of that clearance, if that's your issue. If it's somewhere with lesser access, you might end up having to take some of it apart. Hopefully that's not the case. But there's definitely a very small amount of clearance for that elevator cab before it gets caught on something. So that's another point of problems. Lastly, I think the only other thing I would mention would be make sure that all your gears are sort of loose and free-flowing, that they're not rubbing up against anything, that they're not too tight. Sometimes as we put on new gears and pieces that interconnect, you sort of mess up the alignment of previous pieces you put on. So just every step of the process, if you haven't built it already, go through and make sure that everything is spinning nice and free. That'll save you a lot of headaches down the road, because if that was your problem now, it'd be really tough to get in there without ripping it all apart. So that would be the last and worst case scenario. Again, check your app, check your motors, check your chain, check the elevator shaft and the clearance, and then check all your gears and all the mechanisms to see if there's any points of friction there. Also, excuse this wire. This is for the lights that I've added, not part of the original set. They're just a little too much to undo for this video, so they're still there. Lights are still working. That's something for me. I got to make sure that as this moves around, that it doesn't catch the wire, which it has done before. So hopefully you won't have that problem. And I hope that some of these tips and tricks have resolved maybe some of the issues people have been having. I know that it is kind of finicky. I've certainly had my issues with it. So we'll go through it a few more times just to make sure it's still good. So I'm not immune from the troubles of this, I assure you. And drop. All right. So one more thing I do want to mention is there was an upgrade to this app fairly recently, because I've run this quite a bit in a bunch of different scenarios, working on the lighting and so forth. And I've noticed that the sort of movement pattern of one of the motors has changed. So it's slower to start up right here. Oh, this is perfect. Now it's not working. Good for troubleshooting. Okay. So what I'm going to do is restart it, get it to recalibrate. Okay, try it again. So at this point, right there when it went through all the flywheels, it was slower to start, then it revved up faster. So that wasn't originally part of the programming when this app first came out. It was kind of a constant speed through there. But as you're going through the flywheels, it takes more force. So I kind of like that they changed that. So it's slower right here as it's going through the flywheels, then it picks up speed. Then pauses and then drops. So it seems like everything is working. It definitely does have a few hiccups every now and then, just like you saw. So I always just start with the app. It's the easiest and laziest way to try to troubleshoot it. And if the app isn't working for you and the motors aren't working for you, I guess there's always the manual option. But this is much more fun. So I really do hope that this at least helped one person out there getting their haunted house to work a little bit better. So hopefully we get one more out of it. All right, I'm not going to press my luck anymore. So thanks for stopping by and checking out this video. It is appreciated. Stay tuned for more awesome LEGO videos, and I will catch you next time.